It's a grand opening for what I want to speak to you about today, about the names we've been called, the things that's been said to us, some good, some not so good. Many of you might have been watching The Voice on TV. Anybody watching that? Yeah, I'm quite into it. It's about music and singing. I'm like you guys. Some guys are really verbal next to the rugby field, or when sports is on. I'm very verbal when they start singing about, yeah, he's good. No, that's not good, and just love watching it. Now, if you did watch it, people compete and they sing and they have battlegrounds, and that's what got the word battle there, where two sounding artists would sing off against each other, and then one would win and the one would lose. Now, being a pastor, I couldn't help but see a spiritual angle in that. Two voices ring out, and one will win and one will lose. And what's the voice that we listen to? Because for us as people living in this world, as Christian people, we have God's voice, which speaks truth always, and then we have the father of lies, that is deceptive and speak half-truths. The world is speaking and calling us things or putting a certain value on us that is not what God says of us and not the value God puts on us. I was thinking of saying, well, maybe there's different kind of voices. There's God, and then there's people, and there's the world, and maybe there's the father of lies, Satan. But I think the wrong voices is all just part of the one basket, half-truths or lies. Because I've had people say things that were true as well. It was in line with God's word. I've had teachers or friends that would encourage me and they would exhort me and say things that is absolutely in line with God's word. So God can speak to you through a parent or friend or even a sermon. But in the same way, people can get it wrong, and we can lean towards the half-truths of not saying what God is saying, and rather breaking someone down or speaking a lie over them. And maybe you've heard such things said of you. So the battleground is this. There's the truth being spoken, and then there's lies and half-truths. What voice are you listening to? Who's going to win in your heart and mind? So, how's it going in this area for you? I look at people on Sunday, and I love seeing people come through the doors, and there's families, and there's young, and there's old, and everyone looks really good. Everyone looks like they are just on top of the world. And that's a good thing. But I think for most of us, if you scratch a little bit beneath the surface, it's not always that rosy. It's not always that good looking. Because we have baggage or pain or things that we are dealing with that sometimes feel too hard. Sometimes we are dealing with baggage that we've been carrying around for 5, 10, 50 years. Something someone said to you. And in a way, you can't get beyond that. It's that one voice that keeps ringing out to you saying, you are not good enough. Or you are not valuable enough. You are low grade. Just something, somewhere, a nobody. People might not say those words, but the actions or things we go through, that's what it translates to many times. Remember at school when they would choose the teams? And there were two leaders, and they pick the strongest runners first. And you were chosen last. In my case, I was given to the other team. I'm not a sports person. No one said to me, you are not good enough, but that's exactly what I heard. I heard that. It got embedded into my mind. And I grew up in a school system, which was good. It had Christian influence in it. But the artists, the people that were more poetic, more expressive, they weren't acknowledged as much as were maybe those who were good at sports or good at maths and English and stuff like that. And then again, people don't say it to you, but what I hear is that I'm not good enough. I need to be more like that guy who gets all the A pluses in his grades. Then I'll be good enough. But you see, there's many ways that this comes in. Rejection, you know, someone you really liked. Man, I got to tell you this. I'm the oldest of 4 brothers. And one of my brothers was in love with a young lady. And he loved her with his whole being. He would work and get money as a young fella. And he would spend a fair amount of his money to court this lady. And she'd receive the gifts and then not be interested. And she'd go out to dinner with him and then not be interested. And it was always nearly there. It was always not quite good enough. And in the end, the rejection was so bad that he just gave up on relationships altogether. See, that lady never said to him, "You're not good enough," but that's what he heard. "I don't make the grade." So there's a battle on for our minds. And I mean, I can go on many examples. Can I give you 1 or 2 others? Sometimes we're in a church and we're among Christian people, and I pray that God can give us grace and wisdom that we won't, speak half-truths or false truths to people around us. Because religious people can do that. You know that just this week on TV, the Amish, or the Amish, I think you say Amish community, you know, the people in a part of America that wear the black hats and they don't use electricity and they drive horse and carriages. They showed young people wanting to go to the city to just explore the world out there. And this one young lady showed a letter that said to her, "If you leave our community, you will be shunned and you are in danger of the flames of hell." That's her church community saying to her, "If you leave us, you will go to hell." That's not true. But sometimes we say stuff like that. So, last one. My dear wife at Bible college was told by a pastor's wife, "If you marry Joe, God will never use you." Remember that? Well intended, because they say you can't have a relationship, you need to break up and be separate. And if you marry Joe, God will never use you. And we were engaged at the time. We had gone to them for counseling. Won't go into the details today. But they thought, no, you should rather break up. If you marry him, God will never use you. So that's the voices. There's all these voices that speak out. But in the end, we need to say, "God, help me not to miss what you say." What do you say? What do you say? There's a man in the Bible that wrestled with this as well, Moses. Remember how he came to a burning bush in the desert and he heard the voice of God. But he had been so conceived in his mind about not being good enough, about being rejected, that even though God spoke to him directly in an audible voice, he still could not believe it. He still refused to believe it because the voices from the past were just embedded in his heart and his mind. And like Moses, we all need to overcome these voices. I think the battle of the voices is one we all will face in our life, and probably most of you have faced it. It's one we all must overcome. You can never live a victorious Christian life if you're clinging to what people said, half-truths or lies. Freedom comes when we believe what God says about us. Now, it's said about Moses in Deuteronomy 34. So, at his death, it says this: "Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face." I mean, if you talk about the greatest man besides Jesus, the greatest man in biblical history, it's Moses. It's Moses. Even Jesus referred to him as being great. Jesus spoke to his disciples and saying that Moses wrote about me. Remember in Luke 24, after the resurrection, people were confused and Jesus walked with them and he explained to them from Moses and the prophets that the Messiah had to suffer these things. So God at the very beginning used Moses and spoke to him about the Christ and used him to write the Torah. You know what the Torah is? The first 5 books of the Old Testament. Jews call it the Torah, the law. Moses wrote those. But let's just go back to where this voices started for Moses. We go back 80 years to be precise. He's a little baby. And in Egypt at that time, the Jewish people, Israelites, were slaves in Egypt. And they were growing in numbers, so much so that the Egyptian rulers thought, we've got to clamp down on them because they're going to become so many people that they'll overpower us. And what was the answer? Let's kill all the newborn boys. So any boy that was born was thrown into the Nile. It was a terrible thing. Can you imagine what that must be like? If you give birth, they didn't have sonar in those days. You only knew it was a boy when he came out. And then the relief, it's a girl. The joy, it's a boy. But now the strain and stress, what do I do? What do I do? And the authorities would come and remove that boy. And you knew what would happen. Well, there was one mother, the mother of Moses. She was so desperate that she hid him in a basket amongst the reed on the side of the Nile River.